If you want some FIFA 23 coins, please check out MMOXP.com. Their link is down in the description. They're fast, cheap and reliable, and if you use code REMA you can get yourself a 5% discount.
So what's up guys, my name's Ash and welcome back to a brand new video. I just want to start off today's video by saying I wish you all a very happy new year. I know times have been hard for all of us over the past few years. It's been a very weird few years, so here's to hoping that this year is a lot better for all of us. I just wanted to say thank you for all of your support throughout 2022. I know I've disappeared a lot over the years. I know I've took a lot of breaks and whatnot, but you guys have always been here to support me regardless. So I do very much appreciate all of that. You guys are one of the high points of my life and I have no shame in saying that. So thank you all very much. I hope we can have a fantastic year together and I wish you all the best. Let's get into today's video, guys. Okay guys, so for custom tactics in the 4-3-3 second variation, starting off with the defensive style, we have this on balance. I pretty much use this for every formation and tactics I put out, and the reason being is you get the most control when you are using balanced. If you do use pressure tactics, you can sometimes lose a bit of control. It's the game doing a lot of work for you. You don't feel too involved, even though it can be very overpowered. I like to have it on balance because when you master it, you feel more accomplished. It's a lot easier, to be fair, when you are good at defending. So getting used to balance and learning to defend like that is very good, which is why I like to use it. But if you guys want to use pressure tactics, go ahead, that's completely fine. Moving on to the defensive width, guys, I like to have this on 42. The reason for this is people like to attack in a very narrow manner on this game, so it's important we defend in a narrow manner also to combat that. So we have this on 42 so we can primarily defend through the middle of the pitch, but let's say our opponent does want to go down the wing. By having it on about 42, you are also able to get coverage of the wing, so it's pretty good down the wings as well as being primarily good at defending through the middle. Now moving on to depth, I've been experimenting with depth quite a lot recently because I'm struggling to find something, you know, that I'm very settled on, but I found a good balance in 55, and the reason this has been good for me is we've got a nice high line at times, but then other times it's a little bit deeper, so it's a bit harder for your opponent to make those through balls, but it's a bit easier than, let's say, if you were on 40 something depth, because, you know, when your defensive line is very deep, it's very easy for your opponent to pop over it's very difficult for your opponent to pop over a through ball, but when you have a higher defensive line, it's a bit easier for them to do that. So having it on 55, you're kind of like in between. You can sometimes win the ball high up the pitch and other times you can drop back a little bit, so I have been enjoying the balance, but if you guys want to change this, that's completely fine. Moving on to build-up play, guys, I have this on balance. The reason for this is it gives you the most control when you are building up the play. Now, I've noticed fast build-up can be very good when the gameplay is good, but as you know with FIFA, that doesn't always, it's not always the case. You know, a lot of the time the gameplay is sluggish and whatnot, so you need tactics that are good for all situations in the game. So I like to have this on balance as it does give you the most control in pretty much every situation. And if you do use fast build-up, sometimes your team overcommits too quickly, meaning if you lose the ball you get counter-attacked and it's very easy for your opponent. So having it on balance just gives you greater control. Moving on to chance creation, guys, I like to use direct passing, and if you're on the new gen version especially, I cannot suggest this enough, because if you look at the diagram in the bottom right hand corner of the screen, you can see that your attackers, the white dots, are consistently moving around in a dynamic motion to penetrate the defensive line and really help you create chances. If you look at something like balance, they don't really move that much, they're very static and it doesn't really bother your opponent's defense. So have it on direct passing if you are on new gen, but if you are on old gen, you can get away with using balance. Now for attacking width, guys, I have this on 47 because it is a wider formation, but obviously you don't want to attack too wide even with a wide formation. So I have this 5 above the defensive width, so we defend a bit more narrow and then attack a little bit wider. It gives you a nice natural transition, which is pretty cool. Moving on to players in box, I have this on 5 because I like to get a few players into the box, but I don't like to overcommit my whole team in case we do get counter-attacked. So I find that 5's been a good balance for me recently. And moving on to corners and free kicks, I like to have these both on 2 so we can get some players into the box, but we also don't get counter-attacked too easily. But it is down to preference. You guys can change this as you wish. Moving on to the players you want to use, guys. In the striker position, I suggest going for a well-rounded striker, like a striker with very good shooting stats, good dribbling stats, good pace, good physicality, a bit of everything. So I'm using Robbie Keane, and the reason I suggest this is because in a one-striker formation, you have to compensate for the fact that there is only one striker. So I like to go for a striker which has a bit of everything. In those two-striker formations, you do have a bit more freedom, but with a one-striker formation, I think it's a lot more important to have a striker that can do everything. Moving on to the wingers, you can pretty much use whoever you want, but you know the types of players you should be using in these positions. You want quick players, you want agile players, you want players that have skills, players that can cross, players that can even shoot. You need those technical players out wide. There's not really too much to that, but that's what I suggest. Now for the right centre mid, I suggest using a more box-to-box player, so I'm using Park Ji-sung. He's got very good defensive stats, good shooting stats, good pace, good passing, good defending, good physicality, and the most important thing, the high work rate, because they're going to be attacking and they're going to be defending, so that high work rate is crucial for this player to fit the role correctly. If you want a cheap player which will do this perfectly, Renato Sanchez's base gold is still fine in this position. For the CDM, you're going to want a more defensive player, someone that's going to stay back, break up the play, so I'm using Patrick Vieira. The ideal work rate for this position is a medium-high work rate, but for example this version of Vieira has a medium work rate, but because his defensive stats are so good, you don't notice the lack of work rate. So if you can't get the medium high work rate with good stats, just make sure they do have very good defensive stats, because that is their job. Now for the left centre mid, I actually suggest you guys using a more agile attacking player in this position, but one thing I will suggest is with this player, make them a high player, because they're going to be a more attacking. We're going to commit them up the field a lot more, so it's important when we lose the ball that they have the high defensive work rate to come back into position. If you have somebody with a low work rate, sometimes you'll notice they're just drifting off, they're not in position, and they don't really help you defend. So the high work rate really does help with the defensive support, but I like to go for a more attacking player in this position. With Foden, with his high work rates, has been absolutely great for me. Now lastly, for the fullbacks, I do suggest going for like a balance. Some people like to have two defensive fullbacks, other people like to have two attacking fullbacks. Me, I like to go for a bit of a balance, so I've got Hernandez, who is better on the ball, and Walker, who is a bit better in defence, so I do have that balance in the defence. And then the centre backs and goalkeeper, I just like to make them as meta as possible. Chesney is basically just there for chemistry, but yeah, just go for the best players you can in these positions. Now for the player instructions, guys, they are actually pretty basic, but we're going to talk through them. On the striker, I just have stay central. The reason for this is we don't need them to go to the wing, as we've got two wingers for that, and even some fullbacks when we do choose to commit them to the attack. So we don't need them to drift off to the wings. We need them to stay central in case we cross the ball, and they need to be there to finish the chance, because they're pretty much the only person in that position. We leave everything else alone because we do want them to do a bit of everything. Sometimes we might want them to hold up the play like a target man. Other times we might want them to run in behind, and so having it on mixed attack does give you that balance, which is very important for the dynamics of this formation. Now for the wingers, I like to just completely leave them alone. This is because I don't like to restrict what they do. Sometimes I want them to stay wide, other times I want them to cut in. Sometimes I want them to get into the box for cross, other times I don't. I have basic defensive support, so sometimes they will help cover the defensive areas, and other times they'll stay forward. I don't really like to restrict my two wingers, so left winger and right winger, I just have them on completely default settings, and it actually works out better than you might think. Moving on to the right centre mid, the more box-to-box player, again we have completely balanced settings, the default settings. The only thing we change is cover centre, because we don't need them to cover the wing area as such, as a lot of people like to play through the middle, and let's say we did need to defend through the wing, we've got the fullback, and we've also got a winger that can come back too. So it's important they cover the central areas so your opponent doesn't have a free path through your defense, basically. So have them on cover center and leave everything else alone, because like I said, this player has a high work rate, so he's going to attack, he's going to defend, and it's going to work out just fine. Moving on to the CDM, I just have stay back while attacking and cover center. It's pretty self-explanatory, but we have stay back while attacking because this player doesn't need to attack. He's a defensive player, he's not going to contribute going forward, so we have him to stay stay back, so he's always in position to help us defend. And again, we have him on cover center because we don't need him drifting off to the wings. He's the CDM, he needs to be in the middle, he needs to break up the play. And we have him on balanced defense even because we don't just want him to cut passing lanes, so we just have him on balance for that. Moving on to the left centre mid, the player which I suggested as being a more attacking player, I have get forward and cover centre, and that is it. The reason being is, like I said, he's an attacking player. We need him to help attack, so we have him on get forward, so he's always contributing to the attack. And again, we have him on cover centre for the defensive position because when he does come back and defend, we want him to cover those central areas also, which is why I said the high work rate is very good, because we're going to be going forward, so he's going to have high contribution when going on the attack, and then when we lose the ball, he's got the high defensive work rate to help come back and cover the central areas. So it does work very well, guys, which is why I suggest you guys get the work rates correct in these positions. Now for both fullbacks, I just have stay back while attacking and overlap. The reason being is we don't really need extra width in a 4-3-3 because it is already a wider formation. Usually when you commit your fullbacks forward, it's because your formation is quite narrow. So because this formation is quite wide, we have them on stay back while attacking. We have them on overlap, however, because when we do want to trigger a run forward with these players, so let's say I press the left bumper and send Hernandez forward, we'd want him to overlap so we can stretch their defense even further, and it just gives us extra support when we are going forward. So for example, if I commit Hernandez forward, Di Maria might come a little bit more narrow, so we've got Hernandez all the way out wide and then Di Maria just sitting on the edge of the box, for example. So it does give you more variety, but I like to have them on stay back while attacking as a default because we've already got two centre mids that will commit on the attack, so it's important that these players do stay back, otherwise we'd only have 3 defensive players, which is not good for balance. But yeah, they are the custom tactics and player instructions for the 4-3-3 second variation. If you guys have enjoyed the video or found it useful, I'd very much appreciate it if you could drop it a thumbs up. Subscribe to the channel if you are new so you never miss out on any videos like this one, and don't forget to turn on notifications so you are notified when a video is posted. And with all that aside, guys, I hope you have a fantastic rest of your day. I hope you have a great rest of the year, and yeah, I will catch you all later. Peace.